Have you ever agreed to something just to be polite and slowly realized it was costing you more than you expected? Well, this story begins with good manners, light conversation, and a simple lunch. But it ends with a lesson that lingers long after the bill is paid. I read this story when I was in high school, and even though the story is simple, but the story stayed with me because it walks in like very easily. Everything feels polite, light, almost forgettable at first. But very quietly, it begins to reveal something sharper. Without being loud or dramatic, it exposes how ego hides behind good manners, how expectations grow, and how money changes the balance of power in the most subtle ways. So, in today's episode of Have You Ever Heard This Story? We're going to read about a story written by an English author, William Somerset Maugham. The name of the story is The Luncheon. So, let's begin. So, the story actually begins years later. The narrator is at a play minding his own business when he notices a woman waving at him, like, hi. He goes over during the interval and sits beside her. At first, he barely recognizes her. Time has clearly passed. But she recognizes him instantly and starts chatting like no time has passed at all. She's cheerful, relaxed, and clearly enjoying the moment. Then she says something that changes everything. She asks if he remembers the first time they met. And very casually, she reminds him that he once took her out to a lunch. Now, here's the interesting part. For her, it's just a pleasant memory, a nice little lunch from years ago. But for him, that single question, do you remember, opens the door to a memory he clearly hasn't forgotten. When he quietly asks himself, did I remember? You can clearly and already tell the answer is yes, very much yes. Because whatever that lunch was, it wasn't ordinary. And that's where the story really begins. The memory takes us back 20 years to Paris. The narrator is young, ambitious, and almost completely broke. He is living in a tiny apartment in the Latin Quarter, just managing to get by. Every franc matters. There's no financial cushion here. The woman had written to him after reading one of his books. Naturally, he was flattered. When she later wrote again, saying she'd been in Paris and wanted to meet, he agreed. Then came the problem. She suggested lunch at Foyos, like a restaurant so expensive that he had never even imagined stepping inside it. But here's the thing. He's young, he's impressed, and he doesn't know how to say no to a woman. So he does what many of us would do, like he starts doing mental math and he convinces himself that it will be fine. A modest lunch won't cost too much. He can skip the coffee for a few weeks and somehow he will manage. Well, it's a quiet moment of self deception, and you can already feel where it's heading. When they meet at the restaurant, the narrator notices right away that she isn't what he expected. She's older, confident, and very comfortable in her own skin. She talks easily, mostly about herself, and seems completely at home in this expensive place. Then arrives the menu, and the prices shock him. But before he can even react, she assures him by saying she never eats lunch. That should be comforting, right? Except it isn't. Because what follows is one expensive item after another. First, salmon, then caviar. Each time she insists she is barely eating, just a little something, nothing serious. Meanwhile, the narrator orders the cheapest dish he can find and quietly panics. What makes this worse is how she talks. She criticizes his eating habits, praises restraint, and presents herself as incredibly disciplined. all the while she's enjoying every luxurious bite. This is where the story really shows its teeth. It's not about food anymore. It's about how politeness traps him and how easily someone else takes advantage of it. Well, by the time the asparagus comes up, the narrator is already on edge. She mentions them almost casually, as if it's just a passing thought. He desperately hopes the restaurant doesn't have them. But of course they do. And not just any asparagus, giant, perfect, expensive ones. At this point, his fear changes. He's no longer worried about how he'll survive the rest of the month. He's worried about whether he can even pay the bill. He starts planning escape routes in his head, pretending his money was stolen, leaving his watch behind, anything to avoid humiliation. Meanwhile, she remains completely calm. She eats slowly, enjoys herself, and continues talking. She insists she's not hungry. She insists she eats very little, and yet the meal just keeps growing. The contrast is almost painful. His internal chaos versus her relaxed pleasure. The tension builds quietly, without any argument, without raised voices, just silent suffering wrapped in good manners. Finally, the bill arrives. He pays it, and that's it. He walks out of the restaurant with the entire month ahead of him and not a single coin left. Even the tip he leaves is embarrassingly small, and he knows she notices. They part politely. She gives him one last piece of advice to follow her example and never eat more than one thing for lunch. She laughs, gets into a cab, and disappears from his life. Coming back to the present, the narrator ends the story with the line that changes everything. Years later, he says he's finally had his revenge, not through confrontation, not through anger, not through time. Today, the woman weighs 21 stone. It's sharp, it's quiet, and it reminds us that consequences don't always arrive immediately, but they do. They do arrive. That was the end of the story. And that's really what makes the story stay with you. Nothing dramatic happens, no one argues, no one storms out, just a quiet lunch, good manners, and a lot of unspoken pressure. It makes you think how often we say yes just to be polite, and how often we agree, smile, and pay a price we don't talk about, and how easily self control can turn into self deception when no one questions it. The luncheon doesn't shout its lesson, it just waits and trusts time to finish the sentence. Thank you for tuning in and staying with us till the end of the video. Hope you like the story, and if you like more stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe and stay around. See you next time. Bye bye.